focus, I would say, a little more on the positive side of that, is that we're not here to cure anyone. We're not here to change a person. We're here to help a person based upon who they are and what kind of disability they might have, to access what's happening here at San Diego State and to be as successful as they can. So we really look at our role as kind of what we call a social model as opposed to a medical model. We aren't looking to change people. We aren't looking to cure anyone's disability or their illness. People's disability often are very much a part of their identification of themselves as a person. And so it's important, I think, especially for you who are going to be out on the campus, maybe answering questions to people, talking about different departments, to make that distinction between what student disability services is and what student health services is. So I just kind of added that because I follow student health services, and we don't usually do that, but it's very common just because we happen to be in the same building for people to kind of lump us together, and we're really quite different. So student disability services, I'll kind of just give you a little rundown of who we are and what we do. We're here in Calpulli Center. We have two different locations here in Calpulli Center. We have our main offices where our counselors and our staff are located on the 3rd floor. Then on our first floor, we have our test accommodation center, where all of our accommodated tests take place, and I'll talk with you about that in just a couple of minutes. Then we have a third location on campus that some people don't know about, and that is over in Love Library. A little more central, and that is our high-tech center. Our high-tech center has computer technology and a little quieter place to study for students, and it also is the place where our TRIO Student Support Services program is located. Again, I'll talk with you a little bit about that more as I go on. So what we do in student disability services, our services are governed by the ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and we work with students who have verified disabilities to help to alleviate barriers and to ensure that these students have access to the educational content and the educational opportunities here at San Diego State. And we do that through academic support, through accommodations, through advocacy, and oftentimes through technology. So that's kind of our generalized mission. We also work really closely with professors and with people like you and staff members to understand disability. When disability questions come up, we're the campus resource for those areas. And we also do disability awareness activities on campus. Our department sponsors a lot of lectures, movies, speakers, things like that. We have one coming up next week. If you're interested, on Wednesday evening over in the Student Union Theater, we're screening the movie The Rebound about wheelchair basketball. And we also have the person starring in the movie, a gentleman named Orlando Corrillo, who will be on campus here at the movie and there to answer questions and talk with you a little bit one-on-one about what his experience is. So we do really cool sort of disability awareness things too. So now I'll talk with you a little bit about who the students with disabilities on our campus are. So I have to tell you that as I was leaving for another appointment today, I happened to hear one of the ambassadors talking about what happens in this building. And they did such a great job. We have struggled over the years a little bit with this because it's easy for people who talk about our office to only talk about the things that you can see, right? So things like maybe a broken hand or a broken leg, that's pretty obvious, and we do help students in that category. But it's so important for people like you, who are going to be our spokespersons out there, to all these people who are learning about San Diego State, to have a little broader idea of some of the things that we do besides just those visible disabilities that you can see. So our disabilities might be broken into those two categories of visible disabilities or invisible disabilities. Can anybody give me some idea what I might be talking about, the difference between visible and invisible? What might a visible disability be? Pretty easy, right? I don't know. That would be an invisible disability, right? A learning disability. A visible visible in that they're using a sign language interpreter or something to communicate. So some of those things might be kind of obvious, but then we have that other category, which is invisible disabilities. And some of the things in that category are not as obvious because they're invisible. But I'll tell you that way more than half of the students that have services with us have invisible disabilities. And I'll also tell you that I bet in every group that you will go around campus with, almost every group, there will be a student or a family, they won't tell you, they won't necessarily let you know, but who has an invisible disability and who are really interested to know about the services that we have because, you know, they aren't going to necessarily disclose to you, you won't necessarily know. So some of the categories of invisible disabilities are learning disabilities. Learning disabilities, for your information, a student, a person, to be defined as having a learning disability has to have average intelligence. So it's not someone who, you know, is not a smart person. They have an issue in one area. They might have a slow processing speed when it comes to mathematics, or they may have a learning disability related to comprehension and reading, kind of in one area. So learning disabilities are very specific in a very narrow area. Other invisible disabilities might be ADHD, might be a psychiatric or a psychological disability like panic attacks or generalized anxiety disorder or some kinds of a manic depressive kind of syndrome. And other invisible disabilities include chronic medical conditions. Many people come to school who have chronic issues that require medication management that are in kind of that medical side. So some examples might be diabetes, might be chronic fatigue syndrome, might be an acquired brain injury. So these are all things that you aren't necessarily able to see when you're talking to people in your group. So, you know, I think one of the most important things that I might be able to give you today is that sensitivity to the fact that you never know when you're talking to someone, you know, what information might be useful to them. And again, I'll say the person I heard this morning did a really excellent job in talking about the fact that we deal with both visible and invisible disabilities, and also that we deal with permanent and temporary disabilities. So most of the people that we work with have permanent disabilities. But some have temporary disabilities, and some are those people who break their arm when they go skiing and come and get accommodations in our test accommodation center, which used to be a while back what we always heard ambassadors talk about, which was fine. It was an important thing, but now we're glad that it's broadened, your understanding's broadened. So permanent and temporary we deal with, and then we deal with visible and invisible disabilities. So what does that mean when I say we deal with them? What does that mean? So first of all, just kind of for general information to apply for services in our department, it's a pretty basic, straightforward process. You can just refer anyone directly to our website or come right into our office and we can explain that process. The one thing that is important generally for people to know is that we do require third-party verification of a disability. So we would ask people to have their medical provider, their psychiatrist, their psychologist, whoever they're working with who understands their condition to provide us with documentation. We have a sort of form that they have to fill out. Then once people come into us, they're assigned to a counselor who they will have the opportunity to work with the entire time that they're here at San Diego State with that same person. And that person will work with them to assign what we call accommodations. Accommodations are minor changes that help an individual person to do the same kind of work that a person is able to do who doesn't have a disability. So we call it leveling the playing field. And what that means is we're giving a person an accommodation, a slight academic change or adjustment to allow them to demonstrate their knowledge the same way that a person who doesn't have an accommodation can demonstrate their knowledge. So some examples of accommodations that we give in student disability services might be around testing and test taking. In our test accommodation center downstairs, we do over 5,000 accommodated exams, either finals, midterms, quizzes, those kinds of things. So some of the accommodations that go along with testing might be extended time. So, for example, a student who has ADHD and has difficulty focusing, a reasonable accommodation might be for them to have a little extra time to really show the knowledge that they learned, the knowledge that they studied for that test. So in our test accommodation center, we may give extra time, we may give a student breaks. If a person has a back injury and has difficulty sitting, for instance, for a period of time. One of our reasonable accommodations might be to enable that student to get up and walk around during their test. So there's some examples of the things that we do downstairs. We also have all kinds of technology. For a person who may have a visual disability, we have enlargers, we have technology that can read their screens. If it's a computer-based test for them, so we have that down in our test accommodation center. We also will assign a reader or a scribe if a person needs assistance in having, let's say a person has limited dexterity and ability to move their hands. We may assign a scribe to help fill out the Scantron. So there's some examples of what happens down in our test accommodation center. You may not be asked or not expected to explain all those things, but if you have some general idea of what we do, you become a little more comfortable. When questions come to you, you can always refer people back to us. We also assign accommodations that are classroom-based. So some of those classroom accommodations might be, for instance, a sign language interpreter for someone who is deaf or has very low hearing. We may also have videos captioned, any kind of media. It's kind of an exploding situation with us right now where professors are using so many additional video clips and YouTube videos, and oh my gosh, it's just going crazy. But we make sure that captions are available on all of that media shown in a classroom where a student with a disability related to their hearing is present. We also will authorize note takers in classes. Again, this is all a one-on-one kind of situation. Every student will have a different array of accommodations approved for them, depending upon what their specific disability is. So that kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of what the word accommodations means. It really is an attempt on our part to level the playing field so that a student can show their knowledge in the same way that a student without a disability is able to. So I will close by talking a little bit about two other programs that we have in Student Disability Services. The first is our TRIO program that I mentioned earlier. That's located in our high-tech center over in Love Library. Our TRIO program, we're very proud of it. It's a very competitive grant that we received from the Department of Education. We're funded to serve 225 students in our TRIO program to receive intensive and expanded services. So they include tutoring, academic advising, financial literacy counseling, coaching. We are instituting a peer mentor program this semester or next semester, starting at this semester, rolling it out next. So that's a great program for people who need some extra supports. We also have a collaboration with the California Department of Rehab called Workability 4, where we provide enhanced career services for students with disabilities who are also registered with the California Department of Rehab. So the handout that I gave you has a lot of those services listed. I know a lot of you took notes, but I think in our page 2 we have a lot of our accommodations at least explained there. So that's an overview of Student Disability Services. I think you guys all do an amazing job. We have the opportunity to hear your skills